In Fusion Fall, there are 4 guides for a player to choose: Ben, Dexter, Double D, and Mojo Jojo. A player could have all 4 guides in a single game, having to only pay some taros to switch between them. Each guide brings his own storyline to winning the war with Fuse. Ben is collecting plumber gear, Dexter is searching for missing heroes, Double D is seeking out hidden candy, and Mojo is raising an army. While Ben, Dexter, and Double D are heroes, Mojo is a villain. His storyline takes on a villainous route, with his ultimate goal to overthrow Fuse and install his own army. Let's take a look at what the Simian had planned and how it never came to pass. His early missions, like everyone else's, is mostly to get the player used to their guide and the past. A lot of it is just proving to Mojo and Father that the player is trustworthy, and to introduce to the player that there will be other characters intervening in Mojo's missions. Mojo's army storyline begins in Wing in a Prayer. In this, Mojo mentions that he is working on a secret experiment that requires the player to get some material from Genius Grove. He has the player collect fusion matter from the Tech Wings. His reasoning for the fusion matter? Well, he wants to see how the substance works with animals. While his next missions are just filler for Father, we get back to it in Chemical Excursion. He wants to look at some special chemical X found in the nuclear plant. Surprisingly, the player is not only capable of getting this irradiated chemical X and sending it off to Mojo, but no one tries to stop them at all. Anyways, with the chemical X now in Mojo's hands, he has the player go and retrieve Motorilla's DNA. Once this is completed, the player then delivers it to Ramajama, giving Mojo both the special chemical X and the DNA required. Now that the player has moved down to the city area, Mojo has the player talk to Mandark since the boy genius is also conducting experiments with fusion matter. Most likely, Mojo just wants to get whatever secrets Mandark has and to use it against them later. In War 4, Ramajama reveals what the project is to the player: a super monkey. Like Dr. Erskine in Captain America First Avenger, Mojo is creating a super soldier. Actually, several super soldiers. Mojo has the player talk to a mandroid under the belief that Mojo is attempting to create a better nano. And the mandroid informs the player that the best fusion matter sample comes from Orchid Bay. The player obtains the sample, actually 2 of them, and gets it injected with Mandark's stabilizer. Before it can be delivered, Dexter intervenes and has the player deliver the samples to his deck spot. Never stated what actually happens, but the player gives the enhanced fusion matter to the deck spot and is then sent off to deliver the other samples to Ramajama. It's possible that the mandroid didn't enhance both samples, just the one, and the other that was unenhanced was delivered to Mojo. This theory seems to have support since in the next mission, Beach Boom, Dexter intervenes once more and tells you to go and deliver the samples to the deck spot and then go give the others to the mandroid. So it sounds like you get 2 samples, one is to Dexter, one is to Mandark, eventually Mojo. After doing a few more personal missions for Mojo, the Simian informs the player that he is not working on nanotechnology, something his minion had already told the player several missions prior. He feels secure to tell the player this because his chemical X formula is complete. He sends the player to Nowhere to recruit monkeys, but he is clearly not up to date on Nowhere since there are no monkeys. Courage sets the player straight and tells them to go to Monkey Mountain. Before going to the mountain, Mojo has the player talk to Princess about obtaining jetpacks, presumably for his flying monkey army. At this time, Dexter chimes in to warn the player that Mojo's plans could end up making the most dangerous fusion monster ever. The player does warn Mojo, but he laughs it off and has the player talk to Fuzzy Lumpkins. Fuzzy wants nothing to do with Mojo, so the player is sent to Hex instead. Dexter jumps back in to remind the player Mojo is going to be creating an army not of super monkeys, but super fusion monkeys. So he wants the player to speak with Mandy. In his words, she will help us put a stop to Mojo's scheme. On a personal note, Dexter most definitely doesn't know Mandy if he believes she is the best option. Hex laughs off Mojo's request, but Mandy is chosen as the next option, most likely at the player's suggestion. Mandy has no interest in helping Mojo and instead wants to build her own army. Shocking! Mojo, unaware that we are trying to sabotage him, orders the player to go to Forgotten Falls. He sends the player a current diverter with the intention of putting his formula in the water so that it would go straight into Monkey Mountain, creating his super army. Mandy tells the player where to place the current diverter in her first step to betray Mojo. Mojo suspects nothing and is pleased with the player's actions. On the flip side, Mandy has the player retrieve a hypnotic charm from Monkey Foothills. While Mojo plans to drop Chemical X into the water, Mandy has the player use the hypnotic charm on 2 monkeys up at the mountain. The player is successful, giving the suggestion for the 2 to sabotage the plan. Just as Mojo is putting this plan into motion, the player learns that the charm's power over the 2 hypnotized monkeys is waning, so the player has to go to the top of the mountain to amplify its power. Once this happens, the monkeys sabotage the equipment, ruining Mojo's plans and ending his chances of a super monkey army. Mojo figures out that Mandy is behind the sabotage and wishes for revenge. He sends the player to Dexter, who is finally up to speed and realizes she is trying to make an army of her own. The boy genius wants us to show her the error of her ways, which is further proof he hasn't any clue about her. Although Mojo should be even more furious with the player for going along with the scheme, he instead sends the player to the Dark Glade to learn about the Dark Tree. He gives the player a fusion divining rod to take measurements. This is how the player learns that the Dark Tree is spreading Fuse's infections under the surface, which you can learn about in my video where I briefly talk about this Darkland tree. Dexter emails the player, warning the player that Mandy plans to use the tree's roots to spread her message via the hypnotic charm. Mandy gives the player a signal smasher to use to stop the infection in the Dark Tree's roots. However, Dexter sends an email to say it's actually a signal augmentor, so instead of putting it in the tree as requested, Dexter has the player throw it into the fire pits, destroying it. Mandy realizes Dexter figured out her plan and does not seem angry about this. If anything, she seems almost impressed and takes it as a challenge. She still works with the player, letting the player know that the hypnotic charm that had been used and left on Monkey Mountain was stolen. She sends the player to fight the eye bulbs, but they don't have it. She then has the player try the Jurassic Centurions, and they don't have it. Luckily, Dexter is able to get a lock on its signature. The player defeats the shell slugs and recovers the hypnotic charm, but it is covered in fusion matter, making it useless to Mandy and pretty much anyone on the Earth side. Because it could be used to put everyone under Fuse's spell, Mandy agrees to let the player destroy the charm. To do so, the player tosses it into the cracks of Fuse, ending Mandy's attempts to world domination and bringing Mojo's storyline to an official end. Of the guide missions, this was my least favorite in the game. The storyline was all over the place and suffered from the same filler missions that the others suffered with. One of the biggest problems I have is that right around the time Mandy and the player thwart Mojo's Chemical X problem, Mandy immediately hijacks the storyline and Mojo is left to simmer in anger over the betrayal, with Dexter more or less doing everything. While it is not uncommon for several characters to be in the forefront of the missions, it's usually to back up the main storyline. With Mojo's, his storyline has to be undermined constantly, and then it's shifted to Mandy's attempts to have an army of her own. This could have been fun, but with the game primarily geared towards young kids, the developers probably couldn't just let the young kids align with a villainous plot, even though these same kids probably dressed up like Darth Vader for Halloween at one point in their young lives. 2 ways the storyline could have played out and had been more fun is 1, have the player legitimately wanting to join the side of the villains, or 2, have the player be a double agent from the start. If we go with the first route, there'd be less heroic character interventions, and the sabotage could still be done by Mandy, but instead of still taking missions from her, Mojo and the player could team up to get back at her, or even have the climax of the Chemical X Super Monkey storyline take place up to the very end. With the second route, we'd still have less heroic character intervening on the plot, and the player has a more active role in sabotaging instead of having to be constantly told not to work with the bad people. In this case, we would already know and could react accordingly. This is where I'll stop. Let me know if you had Mojo as your guide and if you enjoyed his story or just chose him to get his rewards. If you have any other ideas on how it could have played out, be sure to comment on that too. I love seeing what you guys suggest because it opens up a dialogue of what could have been. If nothing else pops up, I'll probably be doing a video about Ben's guide storyline. Thank you for stopping by, and I hope to see you all next time.